Hello everyone, Bryce Parks here. Today we're going to be looking at setting up and using layers. Layers in AutoCAD are a very powerful feature. If you think about the old-time transparencies that we used to use in the grade school classrooms growing up, they're like layers are like the old-time transparencies, where the transparencies were these clear plastic sheets that the teacher would write text on or put a picture on and put on an overhead projector, and through the light bulb coming up and a mirror reflecting it onto the wall, you would see the text or you would see the image coming off of that transparency. And you could layer those transparencies, so you could put multiple sheets, if you will, on the projector at once, and you could see all the images quickly and easily. You could see all the images at once, and a lot of times it would get really clustered up and really be confusing. And so you could pull off the ones that you did not need and just show simply the transparencies that you did need back when transparencies were used regularly. Layers are similar to that, where we can put items on different layers and then we can turn them on and off as needed. So if you are in my class doing the 3D design and putting on their dimensions, for example, we're going to be using layers there. So I'm on the 3D modeling workspace and the home tab, the home ribbon, and you can see a drop-down menu for layers, and it has all the layer properties. If you are in drafting and annotation, that typically is on the home tab for you, and it has typically a lot of these ones in the top right up here where you can quickly and easily access those. So I'm going to simply click on layer properties, and notice on my screen here that the layer properties for this new file on my computer is the 0 and the depth points layer. Now your brand new drawing may not have a depth points layer. Sometimes it doesn't. If you're on an older system, it might not have it. If it doesn't, you can easily make one. We'll talk about creating new layers, and if you give it the name depth points, that is an AutoCAD platform to have a layer called depth points. And notice how the printer is grayed out. So anything on depth points layer automatically will not print out. You can see it on the screen, but it will not send to the printer. Whenever you look at the 0 layer, every AutoCAD program or every AutoCAD file will have a 0 layer by default. That is the default layer that you need for creating in AutoCAD. That also is used for making blocks, where you want those blocks to have the attributes of the layer, and we'll look at that in a later video. But the 0 layer is typically the default layer for AutoCAD drafting. So let's go ahead and set up a couple new layers. So if you look right up here, you can see this has the layers with a little sun pattern here. That's to create a new one. If you hover your mouse over it, it should say new layer. This one here is a new layer, viewport frozen in all viewports. The one with the little red X means to delete that layer, and the one with the little check mark means to set current. So let me go ahead and make one. And so I'm going to click that little sunburst one, and notice it allows me to type in the name. So let's say I want to give this the name object. So I can give it the name object. And now if I look across here, it has different features. So there's a light bulb that turns the layer on and off. There's a little sunshine. If I click on that, it turns into a snowflake. That is the freeze thaw. The light bulb, by the way, turns on and off as well. The little lock is to lock the layer. Everything on that layer will be unchanged after that point. You cannot change, delete, modify things on a locked layer. Notice the next one is the color. If I want to change that color for the object, let's say to red, I can click on the color box, and I'm going to change it down here in the index colors, and I'm going to click on the color red for index color. So it gives it the name. If you happen to check on, let's say for example, so if you click on that red box right there, notice it gives you a color number 10, and if I click on that, it'll actually give the color number 10 instead of the color name, like the index colors will. So the index colors down here will give you the name, and these colors on the color palette for the color index up here will give you the actual color numbers. So let's say I want green Oh, I'll change it back to red. So I'm going to click on the index color red. Here you can set up your line types. If you want a different type of line, so it defaults to continuous, you can click on load and you can go down here and say, for example, load a center line, or you could load a hidden line or something like that. I'm not going to do that right now, so let me cancel that. You can set your line weights by default as well. So if you want a thicker or a thinner line type, you can set that by default too. Transparency, that allows it to look more shaded out or darker. We're going to leave that to 0. We can turn on and off the printer. So if I don't want anything on that object layer to print, I just click the printer. It gives me the little Ghostbuster cross out there, you know, where it turns that off. I click it again, it turns it back on. So I've made the object layer. Let me make one more, and I'm going to call this dimensions, or dims for short. And I'm going to change the dimensions. Let's change those to, let's go green. Christmassy colors here. So now I have a couple of layers created. So let's say now I want to start drawing things in the object layer. I can click on that, and I can click the little green check mark, and notice that will set current. The status here will set that current. So I click on the little green check mark. Now everything that I start drawing, dimensions I put in, text I type, will be on the object layer, and it will take on the feature of that layer, or the properties of that layer. So if I draw a line over here, okay, if that had line weights, if that had line types like hidden lines, it would take all those properties on. Let me erase these out because I don't need those. So if I want to move this object, it was originally drawn in the 0 layer. If I want to move that to a different layer, I would simply come over here. I would click the layers, and I would just simply grab the drop down and tell it what layer I want to put it on. So if I want it on object, I would just simply select the object first and then just select my object layer. Go in here, let's change that to X-ray. Okay, let's see here. How about shaded with edges? There we go, I like that. All right, so I'm going to do the same thing with these few dimensions. Obviously, I don't have this part all dimensioned, but I'm going to throw, let's say, these 4 dimensions on the dimension layer. So I select them, come up here to layers, grab my drop down, and click on dims for dimensions, and now it's put them on the dimensions layer. I can notice I did not select this one. I can grab that one and later change that as well. So these are some different ways in which you can set up dimensions. Also, if you change your layer, so I'm in object, let's say I want to go into dimensions layer, I can simply make sure nothing is selected here in the drawing space, click on the drop down menu and click on dims, and now dimensions layer is set current. And so everything I put on here, if I were to, let's say, pop in some dimensions, now these dimensions would be on the dimension layer. All right, so we've talked layers here on setting them up. Let's say that we want to turn some off. So let me go back to my home ribbon, and let's say that I want to turn my object, all my objects on the object layer off. I can hit the little light bulb and it's going to turn that off. I can hit the freeze thaw, it will turn that off too. There are certain items that you can, if they're on a certain layer and you hit the off, they might not necessarily hide. So certain types of blocks, for example, that will do that you have to hit freeze or thaw to make those disappear. If I'm in my dimensions layer, which is current, and I turn that off, it's going to say, are you sure you want to turn that off? So let's say I say yes. So now all the dimensions have gone away, but let's say I start drawing a line and I forgot that I turned that off, and holy cow, I'm clicking all over the screen here, but it's not showing any lines whatsoever. That's because my layer is turned off. If I come in here and turn that back on, notice it turns my dimensions on as well as all of these lines that I just drew. If I were to lock it and want to go in here and delete that, so I select that and I hit erase right here, notice it's not letting me select any of those items. Even if you window around it, it will let you select and erase the other items not on that layer, but it won't let you delete anything on a locked layer. Sorry, I hit the wrong key. If I want to draw something, so let's say I want to draw, and I'm going to draw these in. It's still in a locked layer, so if I go in here to erase this, now it won't let me erase it. If I want to move these items, it's not letting me modify or move those. If I want to offset, let's say we want to do an offset of 1 inch, it's not letting me offset that either. So I need to go back up here and I need to simply turn off the lock, and now I can erase all this garbage that I drew on the screen. No problem. If I come in here and click on the freeze thaw, it's going to give me this error command saying this layer cannot be frozen because it is the current layer. So just a heads up there, you can turn a layer on and off while still in it, but you cannot freeze or thaw it while still in it. Alright, so now we have drawn our object. Let's say that we've dimensioned it. Like I said earlier, we don't have every feature dimensioned. Let's go over here to the paper space. So this is the layout tab. This is a viewport. This allows me to double click in here, and now double click in here, and now I can zoom up in here. I can zoom this, and let's go extents, and it puts that large scale right here in the viewport. If I were to click out here, and if I were to go to print it right now, so let me just do a control print. I'll just select a printer and hit preview. Notice it's showing me my item, it's showing me my dimensions, and it's showing me that viewport, that green box going around the outside. Let me cancel that. If I were to change this viewport over to the def points layer, this is a non-printing layer. You don't want to draw in def points, by the way, but that layer, or that viewport, is now on the def points layer. And so if I go back in and do my print, and I go in the exact same printer and do the exact same preview, notice now it shows me my part, shows me my dimensions, but it does not give me the viewport around the edge. That is the viewport. Sorry, the viewports are what you want to put on def points to make sure that they don't print out on your prints. One other thing here, if I go into the viewport, I can turn layers on and off as well. So right in here, and actually I can also freeze or thaw them in the current viewport, meaning I could have other viewports set up where it's still showing them, and I can turn them on and off as well. So there's just some different features that you can play around with. Let me turn that back on. So in AutoCAD, these layers are very powerful when you get into very complex drawings that have, let's say it's an architectural floor plan of a big commercial building. It'll have literally hundreds of layers. It'll have dozens of architectural layers. It'll have layers for electrical, layers for plumbing, layers for mechanical or HVAC lines. It'll have all sorts of different layers, and layers are a very useful tool in AutoCAD to be able to unclutter your drawing and show what is needed to be shown. And so we access that there, and we can modify those properties there in the Modify Properties box.